All right, welcome to this video on Chicago style citation, sometimes called Turabian style citation. I'm Justin Rempel. So before we dive into what makes Chicago style, we need to make sure we know what we're talking about when we say citation. Citation means the process of referencing our sources. So it's the process of properly keeping track of where our information, ideas, and words are coming from. Sometimes when we're writing, we're just using words and ideas out of our own heads, but often when we're writing, particularly when we're doing research, nonfiction, factual forms of writing, we're often pulling information, ideas, words from other sources, books, websites, that kind of thing. And when we do that, it's really important that we keep track of the sources that we're using so that we can properly cite the source of information for our writing. Why would we bother with citing our sources? What's the point? It's really important to use proper citation. That means that when we use someone else's words or information, we reference the correct source with correct formatting. Really important that we're giving credit where credit is due. We're acknowledging other people's hard work, their research, their writing, their ideas, and we're not lying about where those things are coming from. We're not pretending that these words are our own, that we came up with these ideas. That's actually a form of stealing or theft, and we call it plagiarism. It's immoral, it's unethical, in some cases it is illegal. So there are many different citation styles, and it depends really what subject area you're working in. That'll affect the preferred citation style. Chicago is one of the citation styles. There's actually two types. There's a type called the author date system, which we'll look at briefly. And there's a type called the Notes-Bibliography or NB system. And we're going to look at that one a lot more in depth because it's the more common one. It's usually what people think of and refer to when they talk about Chicago style citation. When do we use Chicago? It's used in a lot of different subject areas like business, fine arts, history, philosophy, religion, or social studies. Where do we use citation in our writing? Well, there's two places where it really comes up. One is the in-text citation, which is throughout the main text of our writing. Whenever we're using words or information from another source, we put in an in-text citation right away to let readers know that the information is coming from a different source other than us, other than the writer. The other place we use citation is in the bibliography, which is a list that comes at the end of our writing. It's a very neat, organized list of all our sources. That's why it's really important as you're researching and writing to keep track of the sources you're using so that you can properly reference them down the road so that your readers know where the information came from. So in-text citation is used anytime we are writing the body of our text and we use words or ideas or information from another source. There's two types of in-text citation. One is a direct quote, and that's when we are using someone else's exact words. When that happens, we put quotation marks at the start and at the end of the quote. So that means right when the words start that we're borrowing from a source, we put quotation marks. There are these two apostrophes in the air. As soon as the words end, quotation marks. They bookend the direct quote. The other time we use an in-text citation is for information or ideas. So we might be talking in our own words, but the info or ideas might be coming from another source. And then we put in an in-text citation to show that those are not our own information or ideas. So one of the types of Chicago style citation is called the author date format. And it looks quite a bit like other styles that we've covered. It looks quite a bit like MLA, it looks quite a bit like APA. And that's because it involves parentheses at the end of the sentence before the period. It contains three pieces of information the author's last name, the year of publication, and the page number, if applicable. And each one of those pieces of information is separated by commas. So for example, we've got this made-up quote from a made-up source. Ancient Egypt, open quotes, revolved entirely around the Nile River in its culture, its history, and its beliefs, close quote, in text citation. In parentheses, Rempel, that's the author's last name, comma, 2022, that's the year of publication, comma, 75, that's the page number, close parentheses, period. So the other type of Chicago citation style, and the one that most people are referring to when they say Chicago, is the Notes-Bibliography System, NB. This is referring to a system that uses footnotes or endnotes for its in-text citations. So how does that work? Well, after a direct quote or a piece of information where you would normally put your citation, here you insert a number as a superscript. That means a small text above the normal text. That number connects to a note that's found in one of two places, depending on how you set this up. You can do footnotes. That means it connects to a note found at the bottom of the page or the foot of the page on whatever page that footnote is. You can also do endnotes, where you have a separate page titled Endnotes at the end of your writing before the reference page, and it'll have a list of all the notes in order. These notes are numbered, so the first one is number 1, the second one is number 2, the third one is number 3, and so on. The footnote or endnote will contain the specific page or pages from which you got your quote or information. That's different than the reference page, which will not have the specific page numbers. The reason that is the case is because you want your note to be very specific and targeted. You want it to tell readers exactly where the information comes from. This is a very different setup than other citation styles like MLA or APA. Your footnote or your endnote contains a lot of information about your original source. In fact, it looks quite similar to the amount of information that you'd see in the end of text citation on your reference page, which in this case is called a bibliography. If you have the same source 2 or more times in a row, you use this abbreviation IBID after the first use, followed by the page number. Okay, so let's take a look at an example to see what I'm talking about. So here's a sample text. Ancient Egypt, here's the quote, revolved entirely around the Nile River and its culture, its history, and its beliefs, end quote. So because we borrowed a direct quote from a source, we need to cite that source. So we insert a footnote. And it depends on what word processor you're using, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, whatever it is, there will be an option, probably under the Insert tab, to insert a footnote. And so your computer program will actually do a lot of this for you. When you click on Insert Footnote, it'll put in that little number. In this case, it's a little number 2, and in the superscript up above the text, and that will link to a footnote at the bottom of the page, or if you set it up as an endnote, to an endnote at the end of your writing. What's contained in that footnote? Well, there's a lot of information. You put the first name and the last name of the author in order, and then a comma, and then the title of your work in italics, and then in parentheses, all the publishing information. The publishing place, a colon, the publisher, a comma, and the publication date, and then you close the parentheses. Then there's a comma, and the last piece of information you include is the specific page number or numbers where that information came from. This is all pretty much identical to the information that you'll see on the bibliography page. It's formatted a little bit differently. So on the bibliography page, you're going to have the last name first, and you're going to have each piece of information separated by periods instead of commas like you see here. So make sure that you're formatting the footnotes properly and the bibliography properly. The other thing I'll point out from this example on the screen is that our footnote number 3 actually comes from the same source as footnote number 2. So we don't have to write out all the information all over again because it's exactly the same as the previous footnote. We can just use this abbreviation IBID, I-B-I-D, period, followed by a comma, followed by the page number that it came from. And then readers will know, oh, footnote 3 is actually from the same place as footnote 2, just a different page number. So now let's start talking a little bit about the bibliography, which is the reference page that comes at the end of your writing. In Chicago style, this page is called the bibliography. It may take more than one page, depending on how many sources you have. And you title it bibliography, centered at the top of the page, capital B at the start. On this page, you list all of the sources that you use for your writing in alphabetical order according to the first piece of information, which is the author's surname. Each entry is single-spaced. It has a hanging indent, which means every line after the first line is indented, and you will leave a blank line in between each entry. For the most current and up-to-date correct citation style information, always use the website Purdue Online Writing Lab. It's the best place to find complete, exhaustive, and up-to-date information. Let's take a look at some sample citations for your bibliography. So this is an example for a book, which is a very common source to be using in research writing. If we're citing a book on our bibliography page, we would put the last name, followed by a comma, followed by the first name, followed by a period. The title of the book would be in italics. All important words would be capitalized. Then we'd have a period. And then we'd say the place of publication, so the city or town that it was published in, followed by a colon, that's the dot above the dot, followed by the name of the publisher, followed by a comma, and then lastly, the year of publication, followed by a period. Okay, so this tells us all the important information we need to know to track down this book. Who wrote it, when it was published, what it's called, all of those things. Here's a sample bibliography for a website. Just like any other citation, we start with the last name, then a comma, then the first name, then the period. The title of the web page should be in quotation marks. All important words should be capitalized, and there should be a period at the end of the title. Then we provide the name of the website. All important words are capitalized, followed by a period. Then we provide the publishing organization, a comma, a publication or revision date. If you can find when the information was published, that can be difficult with online sources, followed by a period. And if you really can't find a publication date, one thing you can do is include the date of access. So when you browse the website, that way at least readers know at what time that information was accessed by you, the writer. Then place a period, and then the last piece of information you can include is the URL, the web address for the site that you're using. If you are citing a video on your bibliography page, start with the last name, and the comma, then the first name of the creator or author of the video. You might need to use an organization if that's who produced the video, followed by a period, and then in quotation marks, the title of the video. All important words should be capitalized, followed by a period, and then write the publisher. This might be the name of the channel or the organization that put out the video, the publication date when it was released, followed by a period, and then you can just state video so that it's very clear to your readers what format you're citing, followed by a period, and then the URL. So let's just briefly look at a sample bibliography page. In this case, it's a sample bibliography slide. If you're making a presentation on a slideshow, you need to include bibliography slides. If you're doing citation style in Chicago, all of our sources are listed in alphabetical order according to the first piece of information, which is the author's last name. You can see that we actually have two by the same author. This happens quite a bit. And so then we put them in alphabetical order according to the second piece of information, which is the title. You can see that we've got our hanging indent, which means that every line after the first line is indented. our entries are single spaced. There is a space in between entries, and we've got all our correct information properly formatted. This is a very neat, orderly bibliography slide.